Welcome back to Inspiring Generations. Today, I have a wonderful show for you. But first, I'd like to say that we have been inspired by so many people. And we could keep going for months with this show, and I appreciate it so much. There's a lady here today that has inspired me to be a better person. I didn't know much about her when I first met her, but as I watched her, I seen that she was a lady that had a really, really big heart. And I really wanted her to be here today on the show because she's an inspiration to so many people. Today, I would like to introduce Miss Grace McKinnon to the show.
Thank you.
Hi, Grace.
How you doing?
Grace, how long, I want to ask you a big question. How long have you been a member of the Senior Center?
I think this is my second year.
Second year being a member?
Mm-hmm.
And you have been involved in the Black History celebrations.
Yes, I have.
A main figure. Actually, you hosted.
I was very honored to be asked to represent Sister Maya Angelou.
Mm-hmm.
She was a mentor for me. So when we had the opportunity to have the city of Chelsea honor her by naming Maya Angelou Day, it was one of the greatest honors I've ever been offered to speak on her behalf.
Yeah. She's a beautiful lady.
Very stylish.
Yes. So you was a part of the literary program as well as her other part of her life, which highlighted her. She was an entertainer as well.
She was an entertainer and a social activist.
Yes.
She was also a teacher. She was a college professor. And as everyone knows, her early days were very chaotic, and she was on the wrong side of the tracks, and she got herself into and out of all kinds of shenanigans. But she took that opportunity to tell her story through her autobiography and inspired generations like myself and yourself.
That's absolutely correct, because when I I'm like a history detective.
Mm-hmm.
I
love that show.
We've had these conversations. I like connecting events. I like, for instance, when I looked into Marcus Garvey and when he passed away,
Mm-hmm.
James Baldwin, not James Baldwin, excuse me, correction. We want to say John Lewis.
Okay.
Who we lost.
Yeah, recently.
John Lewis was born in 1940. And Marcus Garvey passed in 1940. And here comes this strapping young man, John Lewis, saying, we won't back down. We're going to keep pushing forward.
Yes.
And he was just a young man, right?
He was.
And to your knowledge, Maya Angelou had to know John Lewis.
She was part of the civil rights era, and she did actually work with Stokely Carmichael, a lot of the entertainers. Bill Cosby actually was involved as well, and Sidney Poitier, and she helped them get in connection with Mahalia Jackson, Martin Luther King.
Wow.
The Southern, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Whoa.
Yes, she was very
She
much
was
involved.
a very busy lady.
She was also into Pan-Africanism.
Well, that's what I grew up on.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up on American Black history.
Okay.
I grew up on Pan-Africanism.
Okay.
Because of my Panamanian and Jamaican side of my culture.
We should probably explain what Pan-Africanism is.
Well, Pan-Africanism, I did explain it with Marianne Ramos on our first show.
All right.
because we already covered Marcus.
It's worth a reminder.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right.
It's okay.
Okay.
Because you know that Pan-Africanism, and I know what Pan-Africanism is, but I will state it again for our audience.
Okay.
Okay? So Pan-Africanism is a movement that started throughout the Caribbean, Central America, and that is the view of that region on Black history. So Pan-Africanism is a mix of cultures, and it's a mix of Latino and West Indian cultures. I can't explain it in no other way but that way, because that's the way I grew up on it, you know?
And the unifying principle is respect for our African heritage
Yes, yes.
and how it adapts as we cross into other communities.
Right.
Yeah.
So Maya knew all these people.
All of them.
So that must have been a mix of Caribbean people,
Yes.
African people, people from England,
Yeah.
people
And
from
Southerners.
all over the world.
Yeah. She had a great lust for learning,
Yeah.
and she made it her mission to be a student of all these different cultures, but to back up the book knowledge with hands-on knowledge.
Yeah.
She actually went to Africa, married an African, married a Greek, married some of everybody.
She had love in her life, didn't she?
Plenty. She gave
She
plenty.
had a lot of love.
She deserved plenty, and she gave plenty.
And she didn't have any daughters.
No daughters, the one son guy. He was the light of her life. But she did mentor hundreds of young people, including myself.
Yeah.
I made my television debut in Boston here with Sister Maya Angelou. Actually, it was the day Nixon resigned. He actually bumped me off the air, so I wasn't happy about that.
Exactly.
But she made a point of, after we did our episode together, she came and we had students in the audience who were my models to do a cornrowing demonstration. And she greeted us, and she's an auntie. She's like,
I'm sitting here right now, I want to cry because she has
she's like,
such
you
an
know, my niece does this.
amazing life.
Yeah. And that one moment, you know, gave confidence to 20 young Black college students.
Do you remember what she said about daughters in her book, poem, Letters to My Daughters?
Actually, I don't remember.
You don't?
I can't recall it right now.
Well, when I was reading that material, Letters to My Daughter, I said to myself, if you're a young person or an older person and you're getting into the literature and you say, wait a minute, she had only one son. Where did these daughters come from? How could she write to daughters and she didn't have any?
She believed in the village.
But once I got into the literature, she expressed that she didn't have daughters, but everybody was her daughter. She had daughters that were light, dark, Asian, big, small.
Yes.
She even wasn't afraid to talk about your weight.
Yes.
She was like fat, skinny. These were my daughters.
Yes.
And then I began to have a much more profound appreciation for her work.
Yes.
Because when she pulled me in, because then at that moment I became one of her daughters.
Well, she believed in the village, and she was part of a Southern tradition where they respectfully address one another by family titles. You can greet a stranger as, hey brother, hey sister, hey mommy, grandmother, grandfather, recognizing that we're all related.
So now we want to talk about her voice.
Okay.
And this may be very important to you if you're watching this program today. We're going to talk about if you lose your voice and how you can have other outlets and other channels to express yourself. So let's talk a little bit about Maya losing her voice
Yes.
at a young age.
Yes. it was traumatic, and if you read her autobiography, you'll know the details that she had been molested as a young child, and she hid it. Okay, but her uncle was part of the unraveling of that secret.
Okay.
And what happened, long and short, it's worth reading the book to find the details. When it was known who her aggressor was, she had kept quiet with that secret.
Yeah.
But was still functioning.
Yeah.
But about a week later, the man was found dead. And she felt that the power of her voice and her words had brought upon his death. So she went in what we call an elective mutism state.
Okay.
It means that you're mute, but by choice, self-imposed, no physical defect. But whatever the trauma is enough to silence you.
Okay.
And she lived that way for quite a while until her family helped to bring her through it. And she started to recognize and balance responsibility for that event and its outcome.
And that was in a response to domestic violence.
Domestic violence.
Opposed upon a child.
Imposed upon the child. And her vulnerability as a young black female in the South.
Right, right. And to speak of her experience in the South, her grandmother lived in the South?
Yes, in Arkansas.
In that time, it was unusual for a grandmother, for blacks to own a store.
Yeah, but the black community had developed self-sufficiency in certain levels. You could usually find a black this, a black that. For example, in my family in Dover, Delaware, we had a black dentist that everybody went to Dr. Dennis, and everybody went to a certain grocer that was, if not black, was black friendly, so that we could sustain ourselves with a sense of integrity.
And what amazed me about where she was born was that she was born in Arkansas. And me growing up as a child, I was thinking I would never go to Arkansas. From what I know, what I was taught about Arkansas. I didn't think any black people lived in Arkansas.
But they were part of the Great Migration after slavery.
Okay.
We left the South. We migrated looking for jobs. It was economic. Looking for land. We needed some place to expand into and to populate. And going west was a great draw. So you'll find a lot of all black towns in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and they had a very rich heritage. People don't often mention not just the black farmers, the relationships with the Native American Indians, well, the Indians as they were known then, but the black cowboys. That's a fascinating story.
So, from what I know about you, I know that you were a military
brat.
That's
what they called us.
You never was shy to say that about yourself, and I appreciate you being so forward about it. And you also expressed that you traveled.
Yes.
So, as a child, right?
Yes.
So, how was your experiences moving from different areas to wind up coming to Chelsea, Massachusetts?
Well, it's a long tradition of service in our family. For many generations, they've at least done time in the service because the draft was in effect during all those other wars. And after Vietnam, they kind of slowed it down, and now it's volunteer. But when I say brat, that's a title that we honor with pride because, as my father said, they called us brats because we're born to rip and tear.
Okay.
Which is so anti what our fathers wanted.
Yes,
but we went along for their journey.
Okay.
And I think it's important that I was born in 1953. My father was in 1933. Well, he was a young man, okay? And he was born in the Depression. When he graduated high school, which was a major achievement,
Yeah.
At 18, he wanted to join the Air Force. And he stipulated the Air Force as opposed to the Army because it was a new branch of service and you had to be tested in.
Yeah.
It wasn't just any old body like the Army.
Right.
And it was a prestige service, and they had just recently desegregated the troops.
Okay.
People don't realize that in World War I and World War II, black people served
Yes, they did.
in segregated ranks.
Oh, yeah, they did. They did.
They were in very targeted, tight groups. And once in a while, you'll hear people refer to the Tuskegee Airmen.
Booker
Okay.
T. Washington.
Yes.
Booker
But
T.
the Tuskegee Airmen were important because they were the draw.
Yes.
That was the target, the goal,
Yes.
to be respected enough to be in the Air Force.
Right.
And I remember my father and his buddies talking constantly about what this one's doing, how this one's making rank. Some of my father's friends served in navigating. So as children, we were expected to follow that path of discipline, performance, actualizing our goals, working for the community to advance the goals, to be seen
Right.
as worthwhile contributors
Yeah.
and not as dependent.
Exactly.
So I went from being 4 years old, living in Dover, Delaware,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
crossing from the East Coast to the West Coast, starting school in California at 5,
Wow.
moving to Oregon when I was 6, from Oregon back to Delaware. From Delaware, I went to visit family in North Carolina. Then my mother had a baby and waited for the baby to get old enough for us to meet my father in Germany,
Okay.
where we stayed for 3 years. By then, I was coming out of junior high school. From there, we went back to the United States again. I have crisscrossed. I have memorized entire parts of the
Okay.
United States
Yes.
highway
Yes.
system.
It's a journey.
But I
It's surely a
basically
journey, you know?
went to Florida, came back. I ended up graduating high school in England.
Mm.
And I had to stay in England a year. My mother wanted me to go to Cambridge University, but I had been so long out of the country. It's like, no, I'm an American. I want to be a Yankee. And
Yeah.
I came back, went to college in Boston, and had a chance to come and work with community organizers in East Boston.
Okay.
And they wanted to start a program in Chelsea called the Chelsea Citywide Special Summer Program.
Yeah.
So that brought me over the river to help with that creation.
Yes. I wanted to ask you about that. So when you came to Chelsea, what made you want to stay in Chelsea?
Oh, the first day, I had been in Back Bay going to Emerson College, and I had spent some time in East Boston. When I came to Chelsea, it's 1.8 square miles.
We know.
I could walk this place.
It's not a really big
Well, back
place.
then I could walk this place.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
It had a multi-generational appeal. In Back Bay, I was stuck with college students and old people. And
Right.
I was wondering, where are the kids, you know?
Yeah.
And there were all kinds of colors on the street,
Yeah.
all kinds of languages on the street. And that is where I am most comfortable. I'm
Okay.
not really happy in single circumstances where it's all of one or all of another. So Chelsea had its draw.
So did you ever have children of your own?
No children of my own, but godchildren, nieces, and nephews.
Because I know there's a young woman that was dear to my mom and dear to you.
Very.
Very dear to you. And may she sleep and rest, you know,
Raquel.
in her glory.
Yeah, God bless her.
God bless her. But you were blessed with 2 children from this
Those are
young
my
woman.
godchildren.
And that's what I used to see. Honestly, I used to watch you with those children, and I knew what they were going through.
Yeah.
And for you to come in and be a consistent presence in these children's lives used to just amaze me. I said, one day I got to sit down and talk to this woman because you made me brave. And I never told you this. You made me so brave because when you stepped up and nurtured someone's children that wasn't biologically yours, I maybe like 2 years later start going through a situation where I had to step up and take a child that wasn't mine. And watching you do it with such ease and grace, you can laugh about that because Grace is your name. Grace taught me so much about patience, about love, about civic duty, and just not stepping on people when they're at their lowest point.
No.
And believe me, the young lady, I will not mention her name, but she was at her lowest point.
Well, I've called her name once. Just, that's an old tradition to call someone's name in their passing. But we wish her the best in her peace.
Because we actually here in Chelsea, we're facing, overwhelming opioid crisis.
Yes.
And this young lady was a part of that epidemic.
And I had witnessed the waves of it coming through Chelsea. I had seen generations of street people, meaning people who are, their life, you see it in the street, and they're markers for the community.
Yes.
And I had seen, at that point, 2 or 3 generations of them.
Wow.
From all kinds of things, from HIV, opioid, homelessness, violence, domestic violence, and life is far too short to ignore the chance to help somebody else.
Exactly. Because I was myself, to be truthful, I was in that 80s crisis and losing hope.
You've rebounded well.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I was in that 80s crisis. I was still trying to find myself. I was a single mom. I didn't want to give up on my child. I didn't want to give up on my family, which family is the highlight of this Black History Month.
It is.
That's the national theme. And when I think back of what drove me to wake up and love myself a little bit more than I was, and losing hope in my city where I live was one of the things that I said that I wanted to change.
Yes.
So people wouldn't be like me, trying to fight their way back. They can get some advice, they can get some inspiration here on this show.
Of course.
From our elders. Sometimes you don't even got to talk to the elders or the seniors. You just watch them.
Their presence, active presence in the community.
Because I'm sure you've been 60 already.
I'm 67. I'll be 68 in September.
You was 50 already.
I did 50 and did it well.
You was 40 already. And she what? She didn't wake up one day and just become Grace McKinnon.
No.
This is a lifetime achievement.
Yes, I'm exactly who I was raised to be,
Yeah, definitely.
As a young child, I was born in 1953. So putting it in context, that was Thurgood Marshall becoming a lawyer who eventually became a Supreme Court justice.
Exactly.
But landmark legislation like Brown versus the Board of Education, it was the civil rights era just starting to get into full glory. And the communities through the Black church and social services and education through the HBCs, the historic Black colleges, were really committed to a child shall lead them. They invested in my generation looking for what's called the best and brightest, the talented 10th, to be soldiers, to go forward and pioneer through integration, segregation,
Okay.
and to stand. Like I said, my father was military, and I remember the instructions like you would give to a soldier. One of my uncles was a drill sergeant.
Yeah.
That's how they talk.
Yeah.
Stand up, be seen, leave it better than you found it. Okay?
Yeah.
But all that sloganeering
Yeah.
ended up being a shorthand for me.
Okay.
When I came into crisis, when I met racism, okay, I was prepared.
Yeah.
I had my first The Talk when I was 5 years old.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
We were in California.
You're blowing me away right now.
We were in California, and a bunch of the kids were playing in the backyard. It was a military cluster in a civilian setting. We were off base.
Okay.
So we had all grown up at 5 years old with all kinds of everybody around us.
Yeah.
And one little girl was talking to one little boy, and the little boy said, "Oh, and you're black." And she said, "No." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, yeah, you're black like Grace. Grace," well, actually he said brown. "Grace, isn't she brown like you?" And I looked up, and it was, yeah. You know, it was just like, you got blonde hair, you got,
I understand totally what you're saying. Hence why. Someone told me I was black. When I was 6 years old, I didn't know I was black. I lived in a Jewish neighborhood.
Yeah. Well,
I thought I was Jewish.
For me, it's like,
honestly.
well, there's all kinds of colors of people in the world, but this little girl started crying and getting very, very, very upset.
Right.
And she was about my skin color. She had kind of reddish brown hair. Mine was more dark brown. But she said no. Her father had told her that she wasn't black.
Okay.
That because her mother was white, okay, she was different.
Just different.
She was not black. She was not to respond to that title.
Right.
And she considered it an insult.
Okay.
And I'm looking at her, and I'm looking at the little white boy. We're like, well, what's her problem? So
Well, that's what happened to Marcus Garvey.
Yeah.
That when he was in Jamaica, he used to play with the Irish girl. Because Irish and Africans were planting potatoes and sugar cane, and sugar was the goal at that time. And, every day, he would go play with this young Irish girl. And when they became teenagers, her father said, No, you can't play with him anymore. And she asked her father why. And her father said Marcus was the N-word. And Marcus didn't understand the N-word, really. He really didn't understand that N-word. But he knew he had been rejected, not by her, because she didn't even understand it. She was young. He'd
always been her friend.
Always was a friend. And so, she's told not to talk to him anymore. So at 12, he had his apprenticeship already. He was, going to be somebody. And a lot of his trauma started from his dad, too. Because picture this, audience. Your father's a gravedigger. He takes you to work with him one day. He pushes you in the hole and tells you to find your way out. And I truly believe, because of that trauma of the racism that he didn't really understand, and because of him being thrown in there and have to get his way out, he was very, very stern on self-reliance.
Yes.
Because if you got to dig yourself out of a grave, you're relying on yourself. Yes. Nobody is there to get you out of there. And when he crossed to go into Costa Rica. He didn't go over there working on out in the fields. He went there as a timekeeper for the people that were working out in the field. So it let me know that his status,
His prestige.
was a little bit above what we would expect in that time.
Yes.
You
Because
know?
our version of history tends to be flattened,
Okay.
and we don't understand that there's always complexity in the development of any community. You know, for example, I was told that my grandmother and her generation, they had been solicited by the white leaders of the community to work for the governor, the fancy lawyers, the upper echelons of white society. So we were privileged. Okay, that's what I heard commented about.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you're different, because you people were house niggas,
Oh, okay.
okay, as opposed to field. And I was like, what's your problem? Like, my people worked. I mean, I know they worked because they made me work, helping them work.
Like my grandmother, I wouldn't have never known she went through any oppression at all.
Yeah.
You know, she never talked about any oppression. She was happy to take care of her little Jewish ones, because she was a nanny for Jewish kids.
Yes, but all of those opportunities that came by association, if the servants were exposed to the lifestyles of the upper echelon and expected to sustain it and support it,
Yes, definitely.
they had a chance to observe and learn the ways of the master culture.
Okay.
And what people didn't realize is that subversively, you go back home and you teach your children and your grandchildren how to perform and get over with the barriers that they're being presented,
Yeah.
that are being presented for you as a black person, you know.
You made me
And
understand that a little.
my grandmother, God bless her soul, was the smartest girl in her class, bar none. But unfortunately, at 15, or fortunately in my case, my sweet, charming grandfather decided he wanted the smartest girl in the class.
Okay.
And so she got pregnant. At that time, you couldn't finish high school.
Right.
Okay. Well, roll forward, when I was in college at 18, my first day at Delaware State College, a historic black university, where I started my education, I was called to the dean's office. He got so excited. He said, "You're Mickey's granddaughter?" And I was greeted like royalty. And again, the expectation was, we're going to help you succeed. You're going to have the best opportunities we can give you, but you will be expected to perform at a higher standard. No excuses.
So, do all this, you know, difficulties that we face now, with the protests,
Yes.
and I feel, you know, that we were going backwards.
Well, cycles repeat themselves. You know, Black Lives Matter is part of a continuum of civil action that calls attention to the jeopardy that people face. Not just one community. The jeopardy is not just to the black community, but to the integrity of the greater society. If we in America say that we are the land of the free, home of the brave, we respect the Constitution, we the people, all men are created equal, forgetting that little 3/5 of a man, which is the description that was given to black people, black males, okay? If all of that is true, there's a continuity for change, for progress, for confronting our inadequacies and our failures.
Right.
And you can only do that by looking at your situation, and then you need a critical mass, a right number of people
Yeah.
to say this has got to change.
Yes.
And we're going to go.
Definitely.
And then the discussion blows up because everybody has an opinion
Right.
about where we should go next. What Black Lives Matter does is it takes it back to a unifying principle.
Yes.
Okay? We are doing this because we want people to know there were times in our history, recent and past, where the diminution of black life was clear. It wasn't just lynchings. It wasn't just economic slavery. Okay? It was the social diminution. You know, black is less than white. Okay? Black Lives Matter says we want the greater society to recognize us as a worthwhile unit. We will participate in society, but we are worth it.
Yeah. You know, being a history detective, going back to that again, I know that there are organizations that compete for representation of the black culture. And I never was a big supporter of, of any of these
Groups.
of any of these groups, because I was in a mindset where you can leave well enough alone, right?
Yeah.
Everything's fine. But yes, I looked into all cultures, doing my detective work. And I have a profound love for the Irish culture. I have a profound love for the Italian culture. I have a profound love for the English culture. And when I bring all these together, I came to the conclusion that I can't get bogged down in no slavery aspect of a culture. Because when we open up that can of worms, you're going to find that black people weren't the only people that were slaves.
Yeah. It's very important for people to recognize that the slavery of one group over another has extended throughout time. Okay? And I take issue with people letting that be the end of the sentence. Okay? I really have a problem with people competing who's the bigger victim. The Jews were victims. The Irish famine, they were victims.
Yes.
We were all victimized at one point or another throughout human history.
Thank you.
That should be a unifying principle. Slavery will be no more.
For none of us.
For anybody.
For no culture.
Based on race or sex, the sex trafficking, none of it.
Right.
Okay. So I appreciate your honesty in saying that's why you had to go through your internal dialogue.
Definitely did.
I understand politically why organizations are necessary, big organizations, but I also recognize that it's easy for them to lose their steam and to not satisfy the individual constituents because it's a vainglorious opportunity to go on stage. It's a performance, okay? And you need that charismatic leadership to draw in people, but I truly believe that you start where you are. As an individual, retain your power, the power of one, and that can move mountains.
I have so much respect for you for bringing some clarity to these subjects. And when I was a teenager, I think that's why I chose to just dance through the whole teens. Because when I went into the dance world, there was, in art in general, there was none of that. Bickering back and forth, about your skin color. You brought your character, you brought your shimmy like Maya did, And I also wrote a lot because my voice was muted. So I have a profound love for poetry as well.
Yes,
And poetry is something that you love as well.
I do.
Yes. And we have gone over some
I love
conversations
poetry.
about poetry.
I love poetry. I had been selected when I was 15 by a teacher who noticed me, and it was actually, we were taking one of those big standardized tests, and I finished first above everybody else, and I was sitting around looking out the window, and she kept looking at me like, pay
Yeah.
attention to your work.
Yeah.
Go back and do it.
Yeah.
Without talking, just, okay. So she directed me to go back and look at my work. So I was like, okay. And I'm looking around the room. I'm bored. And she's looking perplexed, and she said, and she checked her watch, and I had finished in record-breaking time. Little did I know that that teacher took it upon herself
Yes.
to check the answers on that standardized test right then.
Yeah.
And within a week, she found me walking down the hall and turned to me and said, you will speak.
Yeah.
Because I was one of those nice, quiet little colored girls who
Oh, moi.
speak when spoken to. Children
Yeah.
are to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
You know, don't be a problem.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Values.
That's what she said. Okay. She said, I'm going to sign you up for debate class.
Right.
She was the debate teacher. I was like, debate? That sounds boring.
Right.
You know, she said, no, you will speak. I topped out in the 99th percentile on that test, the standardized test for English. And she was like, you have a phenomenal vocabulary in you. That's a body, not just words, it's the body of knowledge that goes with it.
Yes.
The curiosity that goes with it. So I want you to join the debate team, take forensics, learn about all kinds of different speaking forms,
Right.
master them.
Yeah.
That will be your way to college.
Okay.
That will be your extracurricular.
Can I
it worked.
ask you a question? If you had 3 inspiring words, can you sum up any thing you can say to the seniors and the youth out there that are struggling right now with being social or feeling isolated? Can you give us a few tips on how we can overcome those things? Because a lot of us are in the house
Yes.
and we're not, getting to see each other. And I know you like going to the senior center.
Yes.
And I used to love when you come because, that sociability we had
Yes.
and the great conversations and interacting with our Latino seniors. They love you. Just give our audience a few words of inspiration.
Well, I think you need to change your mindset, first of all, especially for our seniors. We're used to taking care of business. We're used to being out and about. We can still take care of business for ourselves in this seclusion, okay? It was moments of seclusion and isolation that led me to explore a passion, which was words and communication. Follow your passion. It may be art. It may be dancing. It may be political science, filmmaking. Whatever it is that makes you want to do it again tomorrow and tomorrow, I would pick that. For the young people, I would say, this is your opportunity to explore for self, by self. That creates a power dynamic that will sustain you. Self-reliance, as we talked about before. You don't have to be Marcus Garvey with a gravedigger father. You don't have to be Grace McKinnon with a military father. Someone to teach you self-reliance. You can choose it, and it will lead you to power.
Well, thank you for those inspirational words, Grace. I could talk to you for days, but we are running out of time.
All right.
And Grace has been so wonderful for coming out today and giving us some of her wisdom. You know, she's been a highlight in our community. There's many people that she's nurtured and set on their way. And on that note, Grace, I would love to have you back again.
I'd be glad to come anytime.
And keep on inspiring,
Well,
you know, young and old alike.
and I thank the people of Chelsea for receiving me and giving me an opportunity to learn why my father stood as a black man
Yes.
in the military. And even though his respect was a long time coming, to be received here by this multiracial, multilingual community is a strength that I want to acknowledge. It's very, very reassuring for me.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And on that note, we are going to see ya in the next episode of Inspiring Generations.